Hey guys, and welcome back to the Maximum Zoom playthrough. If you haven't seen part 1 yet, I would recommend going and watching that before continuing with this video. And before we get started, I just wanted to say thank you for 20,000 subscribers. I have a more dedicated milestone video in the works that will be uploaded after this one. But without further ado, let's get into the video. Where we last left off, I had just beaten the Wall of Flesh using a mix of Beanades and Summoner gear. So now that I'm in hard mode, I figured that it would be a good idea to upgrade my armor and weapons. To do so, I ventured down to a spider cave in order to farm the black recluses for their fangs, which can be used to craft an early hard mode summoner set. Once I had collected enough, I returned to the surface and crafted the armor and weapons that I was after. Now that I had these out of the way, the next items that I wanted to upgrade were my wings and my whip. Conveniently, the ice golem actually drops items that can be used to craft both of these things. But it wasn't currently raining in my world, so I wouldn't be able to farm ice golems just yet. In the meantime, I climbed up to a floating island and farmed for some souls of flight that would also be necessary in the construction of my new wings. Once I had enough souls, all that was left to do was wait for rain, and before long, I got some. However, it wasn't quite the type of rain that I was looking for. But the slime rain did provide me with some gel that I would go on to use for asphalt in the future, so it wasn't all bad. After King Slime had been defeated and the slime rain had ended, I returned to waiting for actual rain to arrive, and after a bit more time, it did. So, I quickly made my way over to the snow biome, hoping to find an ice golem. However, when I did find one, it didn't end very well for me. So the second time around, I used my summons more effectively, and by some stroke of luck, the first ice golem that I defeated dropped both of the items that I needed. So I returned to my base, but before I could craft the items that I wanted to, I first needed to obtain a hard mode anvil. So after smashing some crimson altars, I headed down into the caverns below my base in search of some hard mode ore. Once I had enough for an anvil, I'd made myself the new wings that I wanted, but before I could craft the upgraded whip, first I needed to obtain some more souls of night and light. Once I had finished with this, I finally made myself the cool whip, concluding my first round of gear upgrades. Before I could fight any bosses, however, pirates decided to invade my world, so without much of a choice, I began to fight them, hoping that I could get a pirate staff. Though, because of its extremely rare drop chance, I was not surprised when I didn't get one. With the pirates gone, I decided that it was finally time to fight my first boss. So when night fell upon my world, I grabbed a mechanical eye that I had gotten earlier and summoned the twins to face me. As the two bosses arrived, I was given another reminder just how big these beings actually are. Fortunately, the behavior of the twins allowed me to see both bosses for most of the fight, even with max zoom. So, using my whip and summon combo, I began to target Spaz, hoping to take out one of the twins before enraging the other. As Spaz's health began to drop, he disposed of his fleshy outer layer, revealing his mechanical self, and with this action, he began spewing a stream of cursed flames in my direction. Continuing my evasion, I focused even more attacks onto Spaz. Knowing that his time was limited, Spaz made one final push for me, and just before he was defeated, he managed to get a couple of final hits in. Now in a 1v1 with Retinizer, my health dwindled to dangerous levels. Knowing that the fight could end at any moment, I made sure to evade as many lasers as I could. But even still, Retinizer managed to keep my health low. So as the boss began to lose health himself, he followed in his brother's footsteps and transformed into his mechanical self, bringing with him a large rapid-fire laser. When I saw this, I knew that my time was limited, so I gave everything I had into a final attack. After narrowly avoiding defeat multiple times, both Retinizer and myself reached our breaking points, and the fight ended in a draw. However, I was still granted my loot, so I was happy. With the items that I had obtained from the twins, I was able to craft both an optic staff and a new whip, which could help me for the next two boss fights. Feeling more confident with my newly obtained upgrades, once night fell upon my world again, I used a mechanical skull and summoned Prime. As the boss approached, I began my attack. During the fight, max zoom made it quite hard to see where the boss and his many arms were coming from. So, unlike most of my fights with Prime, I wasn't really able to choose a specific segment of the boss to target. Instead, whenever I saw a body part, I used my whip to do as much damage as I could, while trying to primarily damage the head. Seeing the advantage that he had, Prime made fast jabs at me, knowing that I would have a hard time seeing them coming. But as the fight continued, I began to get used to fighting Prime without being able to see him, and after taking out his laser arm, one of my biggest threats was no longer able to damage me. Seeing that he was in trouble, Prime desperately tried to hit me with everything that he had left, but it was no use. With a bit more time, I took down Prime and collected my reward. Before fighting the final mech boss, I decided to upgrade my ballista, so I farmed a couple of Old Ones Armies events until I had enough Defender's medals to purchase the second tier. With my final upgrade in hand, I felt ready for the destroyer, so as night fell once again, I prepared my defenses and summoned the boss. As the destroyer arrived, I began dealing heavy damage to the boss with a combination of my summons, Nimbus Cloud, and Ballista, while using my whip to clear out the probes that were being deployed from the worm. Because of the increased zoom, it was quite a bit harder to dodge all of of the lasers that were being shot at me. However, by evading a good chunk of them and collecting the hearts that were being dropped by the numerous probes that I had defeated, I was able to keep my health topped off. With my strategy working, I continued to attack the boss with a wide variety of damage sources, and before long, the destroyer had had enough and burst into pieces. With the 3 mech bosses finally taken care of, I headed over to the jungle and began to work on an arena for the Plantera fight. If I got lucky, I could hopefully get a new summon from the plant, so I wanted to fight her as soon as possible. But before I committed to a fight, I decided to search around the jungle to find some life fruit which would help me in the future fight. Once I had collected all of the life fruit that I could find, I returned to the arena that I had just built and broke the bulb, spawning the boss. As the plant approached, I set up some additional damage sources in preparation for the fight, and as she reached me, I began flying circles around her, making sure to avoid her damaging petals that she was firing at me. As my countless attacks continued to damage her, Plantera decided that she was done messing around as she transformed into her second phase. Knowing the danger that she posed, I focused all of my efforts on dodging her attacks. But now that they were spread throughout my arena, even with my best efforts, Plantera managed to hit me numerous times, dropping my health down quite low. But this was not a one-way battle. As my health dropped, so did hers, and as the fight continued, I managed to clear out more and more of her damaging vines, making it easier to avoid taking further damage. So although it was a close fight, in the end, I managed to prevail, taking down the plant for good. Sadly, I did not get the summon weapon that I was hoping for. However, right after I returned from the fight, a solar eclipse began in my world, giving me a new opportunity to upgrade my gear. The fight with the solar eclipse enemies was quite long and also deadly, but in the end, I managed to get quite a bit of money, as well as items, which were a great help to me. Among these items was a deadly spear staff, so although I was unable to get a summon weapon from Plantera, in the end, I still managed to get an upgrade. And speaking of upgrades, with Plantera gone, I was now able to summon a pumpkin moon, which would provide me with some more nice items, as well as spooky wood, which I could use to craft a new set of summoner armor. With this in mind, I set off to the dungeon in order to farm some more ectoplasm that I would need to craft a pumpkin medallion. While farming for the ectoplasm that I needed, I also managed to get a morning star, which was not an item that I had been planning to farm for, but was a welcome upgrade nevertheless. Once I had enough ectoplasm, I next fought the twins again, so that I could get some more hollowed bars. And once they were defeated, my pumpkin medallion was complete. As I fought the pumpkin moon, I managed to take down quite a few enemies. However, the pumpkins were a little bit more powerful than my current gear could handle, so although I did manage to get some good loot, in the end, it wasn't enough to craft the full set of spooky armor. So, I decided to repeat the process again, and I managed to scrape together enough wood to craft the rest of my armor. On top of this, I also got a spooky twig, so I used that to craft some wings for myself. Now that I had finished with another round of gear upgrading, I decided that it was time to fight Golem. So, I made my way to the jungle temple, and after reaching his chamber, I prepared for the fight and inserted a power cell. As Golem awoke, he began lashing out at me with his fists, but using my combination of attacks, I was able to counter them and avoid taking damage. As I destroyed his fists, Golem became angered and began firing lasers at me in an attempt to defend himself, but I didn't let this slow me down as I continued my attack on him. Seeing that he was in trouble, Golem deployed his final defense measure by releasing his head and sending it after me. Although this attack was quite dangerous, managing to take my health down quite low, in the end, I still managed to come out on top, defeating the ancient guardian of the temple. With Golem gone, next up was the Lunatic Cultist and the Lunar invasion. But before I attempted this endeavor, I decided that I wanted to get a new summon weapon. So I climbed up to space and waited for a Martian probe to detect me. Once one had, the Martians arrived in an attempt to take over my world. The fight with the Martians was long and difficult, but in the midst of the fighting, I did manage to obtain the item that I was after. So once the Martians had been driven off, I made some final preparations before setting off to confront the Lunatic Cultist. With my large selection of late-game summoner items, I began my battle with the leader of the Lunar Cult. My recently obtained UFO summons quickly drained the boss's health. Their precise accuracy and high damage was perfect for the fast-moving cultist, and after not long, I had won the fight, prompting the Lunar invasion to begin. My first objective was taking down the Stardust Pillar so that I could craft my final summon weapons. With the help of my UFOs, before long, the Stardust Pillar was defeated, and I was able to collect the useful Stardust fragments. With my new weapons in hand, I set off to fight the next couple of pillars, knowing that the final boss battle was drawing ever closer, and with the defeat of the final pillar, my battle with Moonlord was set in stone. As the Lunar boss approached, I made my way to the platform that I had built earlier and waited for the fight to begin. When Moonlord finally did arrive, I immediately began running in a straight line away from him while sending my Stardust Dragon dragon to damage his eyes. Although I couldn't see the boss, using audio cues that I had picked up from previous fights, I evaded many of his attacks, while my Stardust dragon continued to damage his eyes. Thanks to the dragon's high damage output, before long, Moonlord's core was revealed, and the final DPS race to the finish began. As the fight drew near a close, I was grabbed and dragged into the boss's center, taking heavy damage, but fortunately, I was able to escape, and before long, the Lord of the Moon succumbed to the damage from my Stardust dragon, and the fight ended in a blinding flash of light. With the danger gone, I claimed a prize and celebrated my victory, knowing that I had finally beat the game with maximum zoom. If you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing to be notified when I upload more in the future, and if you'd like to see live gameplay, I have a Twitch channel where I stream 4 times a week. There will be a link in the description if you're interested. But with that out of the way, thank you for watching, and I will see you guys next time. Thank you to Beav Notice Me Senpai and all my other patrons for helping make this video possible.